Senate Committee Room, 1300. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, 1300. Did you know live Senate video is now available at youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. Senate Committee Room, 1300. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, 1300. Did you know live Senate video is now available at youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. Senate Committee Room, 1300. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, 1300. Did you know live Senate video is now available at youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. Senate Committee Room, 1300. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, 1300. Did you know live Senate video is now available at youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia? Senate Committee Room, 1300. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, 1300. Did you know live Senate video is now available at youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. Senate Committee Room, 1300. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia.
Good morning and happy Friday. Welcome to Senate Finance Appropriations Subcommittee on Capital Outlay and Transportation. This morning we'll have a presentation from the Department of General Services, followed by the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services. So first up, we have Banshi Twaldi, our Director of General Services. Good morning.
Senator McPike, members of the committee, thank you. Good morning. My name is Banshi Twaldi. I'm Director of DGS. Thank you for having me today, and I'm going to try to... Okay, so what I wanted to do this morning is to give you an update on several of DGS's capital projects. And I wanted to start out with an update on Central State. So Central State Hospital, this is a 461,000 square feet project that's been authorized in the budget with 252 beds. It provides administrative as well as support service building in a two-story section and provides patient living arrangement and treatment areas in one of the other sections. It also will provide for 141 forensics and civil patients and about 111 maximum security patients. This is a project, as you know, that's being managed by Chien Vu, most excellent project manager for DGS. To just tell you where we are currently precasting panel installation in the max living units, and treatment is almost complete. Roofing and exterior window installation has recently begun. Concrete slabs and treatment moulds areas are also ongoing. The work in the courtyard is already in the early stages. And then finally, mechanical, electrical, and fireproofing is ongoing. As you can see, the project milestone, the timing for the completion of this project is that the structural steel and precast wall will be completed June of 2025, and the building, drying of the building will be December of 2025 with the completion of the project, substantial completion of the project in 2027. This is just several of the pictures that we wanted to show you where we are. As you can see, the treatment structure, the treatment mold structure framing. You can see that we've installed interior wall framing, structural framing for max unit, and then it's on the bottom picture, you can see the main entrance to the hospital, the work that's been ongoing. Additional pictures to just show you where we are. So you can see equipments have begun to be delivered. The administration area has been lifted. When completed, it will provide treatment and rehabilitation environment for patients. It will have an integrated security system and safety and information technology, and then of course, and importantly, a redundant water supply both for drinking and for services. The other project I wanted to give you an update on was the Department of Forensic Science. This is also a project that's being managed by DGS. As you know, this project co-locates both Department of Forensic Science and the Office of the Medical Examiner here in the downtown Richmond area. It will be co-located in Hanover. Over the years, they've experienced growth in the type of cases they've received, as well as staffing to support these critical missions. Again, the same milestone information we wanted to share with you. As you can see, work has been progressing in January 2025. The interior south building that will house the toxicology is almost completed and inspected. It has been completed and inspected. The north building of the OCME, the training and state offices, will be finishing up walls and above ceiling rough-in. Drywall has begun. Metal panels around buildings are 75% complete. As you can see, the project milestone for this is that equipment startup, December of 2024, will continue through April of 2025. Furniture installation will begin November of 2025, and then ultimately substantial completion will be December of 2025. We anticipate moving staff sometime early in 2026. This facility will provide about 281,295 square feet with 350 parking spaces on a 22 acres of land. And so I want to move on to what is currently in the governor's introduced budget. As you know, Chapter 2 provided language for DGS to study the utilization potentially of a new state building either at 7th and Main Street, which is the old Virginia Employment Commission building, and or VDOT Annex building site. In order to complete this work, we looked at several things, and the language required us to look at the facility size and scope. It asked us to consider the operational and space needs of agencies that are currently located in Monroe. It asked us to consider conference space needs as well as additional parking for state employees, and also the timeline and when the state building could be built, and then the cost estimated for the new building. The timeline as well as the cost estimates have been provided in detail to staff. The other thing about the budget language provided was that it put a hold on movement of tenants from Monroe until the actual study was completed to allow us to look at various options and what would be the best possible solution for the Capitol Square area. So the work group was made up of DPB staff, Department of General Services, and the money committees, and we met for almost weekly for hours. We looked at several scenarios, and it was a very collaborative work group. We looked at several scenarios, building sizes. We looked at 350,000 square feet, potentially 316,000, and then 250,000 square feet. At each site were studied, and we looked at either all new construction or renovation and expansion. We also looked at the building layout with safe drop-off and loading areas. We considered how to maximize our site footprint to address the required number of parking spaces, and how we can include a conference center to serve our tenants around the Capitol Square. And then ultimately, we also wanted to make sure that we provided swing spaces to allow for short-term maintenance of existing state buildings for modernization, and then also ultimately for future growth as more employees are either brought in by agencies. As we considered all of these things, we came to the conclusion that the best possible site for the new state building would be at the VDOT Annex for several reasons. One is because it's where it's located. It is the seat of government. It is strategically located. We also believe that upon reviewing all the information that we had in front of us, to renovate the current VDOT Annex certainly would not meet our objectives without a conference center. And then ultimately, the cost to renovate would approximately be equal to the new construction cost. One of the other things we did to address parking is we did a geotechnical investigation to determine the depth of the bedrock of the VDOT Annex, as we did also for the 7th and Main. And we did that this summer. I'm sorry, I mean, to go to this one. I moved to this one. Apologize, I think I'm moving a little bit too fast to the,
Senator Deeds.
The parking at the VDOT, the new building would be underground?
yes, sir. All right. The proposed building, we also looked at advantages and disadvantages of both 7th and Main and the VDOT annex. The 316,000 square feet at the VDOT would include the required office and swing spaces, as I just mentioned. And then the conference center, I'll talk a little bit about the challenges with the conference center not having one. And then ultimately, parking spaces of between 800 and 836 spaces would be underground at that site. It also had advantage of operational advantages to support our team. Our facility team is currently located at Monroe. Having them close by to support all the Capitol Square state buildings would be an advantage. It required only 5 level of parking versus the 8th level parking at 7th and Main that addressed which would reduce the construction cost. We also felt that it would have fewer unforeseen conditions if we were to build versus to renovate, because we would not know what other additional issues it would be to renovate a building of such as the VDOT annex, which is very old. And then ultimately, we also looked, the advantages it would have 2 access points to allow for the garage, access to garage, convenience parking on grade, and then a drop-off lane. The cost also looked at, as I said, the various studies, and the comparison between the 2 sites for the proposed program is cost mutual. It's about a little bit over $400 million. As you can see, the proposed schedule would be about 24 months, and construction would be about 36 months. The governor's introduced budget does several things. It transfers the remaining balance from detailed planning funding from the 7th and Main Street project to the proposed new office building. That's about $16.7 million. It proposes the sale of the 7th and Main Street to be sold at a fair market value and transfer proceeds to the general funds. It leaves the issue of the size and scope will be decided at a later date, simply because we would still be going to the detailed planning. It also provides funding for renovation of state-owned buildings at the seat of government, and then the costs associated to relocate state agencies from Monroe. One of the things the work group debated and talked about is to identify vacant state facilities, offices that might be available for initially to move our state tenants, to consider those first before moving them to leased spaces. And with that in mind, we identified about 118,000, about 1,800,000 square feet that's currently available in the Capitol Square. So first, we would move most of our tenants to executive control vacant spaces. Then the remaining tenants would be reallocated to lease spaces until the new state building is built, and then bring them back to the extent possible. The funding that's in the governor budget also provides $35 million. A portion of that would be to use to renovate 70,000 square feet out of the 118,000 that we currently have available to move our state employees. And then that would also cover move to state and lease spaces. Generally, we would need between 12 to 18 months. That's normally how long it would take us to retrofit some of these facilities, to work closely with some of the lease spaces, and to identify the programmatic needs of agencies as they identify the lease spaces, and how we can retrofit that to meet the program needs of those agencies. Just give you an idea, as we talked about first moving tenants to state-controlled building, these are where we are currently anticipating, discussing, and working with agencies. For example, DHRM would move to Main Street Center, DOA would move to Main Street Center, and then the Inspector General's office to Reed's Row, which we've been working very closely with my team to get that ready. And then some of the other agencies would, for example, APA, lease space or potentially state building. DOE, as you know, portion of their staff is Old City Hall. we would move the entire team to lease space just because of the number of employees that they have. They wouldn't be able to fit in most of our state building until at a later date. And of course, just the clinic, the health clinic, we've been working with them to identify either lease space or state building. The goal is to keep them as close as possible to the Capitol Square as they serve the needs of our state employees. Vacating Monroe. One of the issues that we had to look at very closely is parking. Currently, what we are considering is that if we move many of the tenants to state-owned building, we would be able to absorb about 782 of those within our parking system, so they would not leave the system. But about 247 of those would need to be allocated to lease space, and those would be those entities that are actually going to be moving to lease spaces. As I said, some agencies relocating lease spaces will also remain in state buildings, so we will be managing that very closely in the next few months and working with the agencies to identify who would be going to which park spaces. Conference center. Our conference center for the state, in terms of just within the Capitol Square, is Monroe. And just in 2024, we had about 450 meetings that were held in that conference center. As we considered a new state building, that was one of the consideration, is to ensure that the new state building also has a conference center to accommodate those coming from other entities or those in Capitol Square to meet in that facility. We are looking to identify temporary addition to an existing state facility to address on a temporary basis, sort of a Band-Aid for our conference center. We are going to be surveying agencies and Capitol Complex to identify what their conference space needs might be. And then for those agencies that are leaving or moving to lease spaces, we're working with our real estate team to make sure that those locations have a conference center to address their needs. Excuse me. So, disposition of Monroe. The introduced budget does not address how we would dispose. However, the work group recommendation we provided does. And the reason it's not included in the budget is because it's going to take us time to move tenants, and that could be addressed in the biennial budget moving forward this coming summer. Mothballing it, surplusing, or potentially selling the site is an option that we've considered. We also provided estimate costs for what it would cost to demolish, depending the type of demolishing, mechanical or implosion. It would take about 6 months to design that and to be able to incorporate that in our ultimate disposition of Monroe. Total demolition time is about 19 months. The other building, a project that DGS is managing, is the Commonwealth Courts building. I'm sorry.
Senator Deeds.
Sure. I'm sorry, Senator, I did not hear the question.
Somebody wanted to buy it.
I will check on that. I'm not aware of that, but that might have been the case. I certainly wasn't aware. I'm not sure. I'll check on that, however. I wanted to give you a brief overview as well on the courts building. This is a project that's being managed by DGS. We went back and looked at the scope and size of this project. We've been working very closely with both the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court as well as the Court of Appeals Judge, Chief Justice, to determine what the long-term need would be to right-size the project. And so because you gave us the opportunity to demolish both the east and the west tower, it actually provided more efficient way to incorporate more of the programmatic needs of the court. So the demolishing of the existing tower provides more efficiency And the total proposed projects about 295,159 versus what was initially provided, which was 325,000. The new program will include additional offices for 17 Court of Appeal judges as a result of the legislative expansion of the Court of Appeals that occurred. And also, we considered future growth of the Supreme Court. It would allow for gallery seating for the judges for the Supreme Court between 200 to 240. It would also include. I'm sorry.
Matt,
Yes.
how much seating do they have now? They don't have that much space now.
They don't. They're very limited.
You think they need 200 seats in the Supreme Court?
Yes, that is the actual program need. Chin, how much do they have right now?
180.
Yeah.
They have about 180 now, but they need as many as 240.
It would allow for that
Okay.
number of people. Yes.
Well, I mean, it's just, you're down there more than I am. Do you think they need that much space?
Mr. Chair, I mean, I guess if you're asking me my opinion, I mean, that doesn't sound unreasonable. I've been in there for argument, and the room is fairly full on days where, they are hearing full argument in cases, and I've been there for occasions, in which the room is jam-packed for swearing-ins and other events. And I'm sure there are cases that would generate that. I mean, it doesn't seem to be that big of a difference between the current seating and 220, so doesn't shock me.
Thank you. The new courtroom also will provide seating for en banc courtroom capability. Currently, I'm told that the Court of Appeals, whenever they have an en banc hearing, all of the 17 judges, they're holding that in the Court of Appeal, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, so they use that for that purpose. It also will provide additional 31 parking, all for the judges for that reason. And the next slide just simply shows you the time schedule when this will be, the demolishing of the east and west tower will be sometime between January of 2026, and December of 2026. We will come back later and ask for full construction in 2026. One of the new projects that we've requested is for the DCLS lab. This is the Division of Consolidated Laboratory Services that is currently located in the downtown area. This is the State Public Health Lab. It provides environmental and emergency response laboratory. It was built in 1972. It has over 325 employees. It performs over 9 million tests of various kinds each year. As you can see in this slide, I've listed all the type of tests that it performs. One of the new ones and continues to expand is the newborn screening testing. It does herbicide, drinking water, pesticide, just a really large endeavor, and provides critical mission to the citizens of Virginia and the Commonwealth. The lab is needed for several reasons. One is because of existing facilities capability. The services that it provides cannot accommodate the currently and continuing expansion of the newborn screening program and the demand for diagnostic and also the public health testing. And they want to be able to also have capacity to respond to new testing requirements and next public health crisis that as we saw with COVID and other areas. So you all the General Assembly provided pre-planning money. And using that money, we were able to determine the following things. One was that we needed to expand from the current 191,800 square feet building to about 299,000, with 78% lab space, 13% office space, and then considering lab flow versus people flow versus efficiency and productivity. It would accommodate a growth for staff. It would have additional surface parking, and then ultimately future expansion. The governor's introduced budget provides detailed planning money to move forward with this project for you all to consider to build this new project in approximately 20 acres of land. We are asking that this project be located in Hanover County, adjacent to the DFS facility for various reasons. One is ease of access to the FedEx couriers and other modes, because we get a lot of lab testing that is delivered to us through the mail. Favorable distance and time to transport and delivery of high-threat samples required immediate access and testing from the FBI and other law enforcement agencies. And then we did consider the Department of Forensic Science, the old building, once they move out, and we've determined that it would require multiple construction phases, adding time, and about $40 more additional $1 million to actually construct there. More importantly, it would be constructed up and not provide elbow. And what we wanted to do is actually have a lab that is probably 1, maybe 3 floors high for purposes of immediate evacuation, if there are threats, if there, which has happened in the past when they're doing some testing of various biohazard types of materials. Another project is the State Police Training Academy. Just to give you a little bit of background, the demand for this facility, state police conduct about 2 to 3 basic training per year. They try to target about 84 students at each school. The trainings for just basic schools about 28 weeks long. They provide over 100 instructions, over 1,143 total hours of instruction. But in addition to the basic training for troopers, the Training Academy also provides training for dispatchers, civilians, in-service training for all other law enforcement within state police. They provide specialty training, leadership training, development training. Right now, state police has indicated to us that there's about 6 months to 1 year waiting period for non-basic trooper training. Currently, the present Training Academy has 3 separate buildings. One was built in 1950, one was built in 1960, one was built in 1989, and so all the trainings are being done in 3 different places. So the governor's introduced budget provides full construction funding. It would allow the demolition of the 90,000 old academy and build 184,000 square feet of new training academy. We did look at this from a DGS perspective. We worked very closely with state police. We right-sized it. I believe there was, about a year ago, there was another scope that was much larger. We believe this is the right size for state police. We also compared it to another state, in Pennsylvania that does comparable. Ours fits what we need. It would provide classroom, offices, dormitory, and of course, IT specialized training. As you know, state police is involved in cybersecurity types of investigation. And it will also provide a gallery, a memorial gallery for fallen officers within the main lobby. The current one is extremely cramped, and this would give them the opportunity to expand and renovate it to make it in a way that allows more visitors to come in for family and friends and officers to pay respect. Educational facility to house K-9 program and a cafeteria, and additional 286 surface parking space for state police. As the next slide shows you, the proposed schedule is if the full construction funding, the way we've planned it, moves forward, design will start in 2025 and end in 2027. Construction will begin in 27 to 2029. This is, as I said, a DGS managed project. It would also help them reduce the backlog of training. I also want to brief you a little bit about the proposed. Sure.
And this would be at the current site?
Yes.
So what would happen to during the construction, would there be no training or?
No, the training would continue. It would be a phased training. And my understanding is that we would demolish and move certain training to certain buildings and then phased in those trainings.
So you wouldn't be tearing down all 3 buildings at the same time?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. Certainly not. State police would not like that. I wanted to give you a little bit an overview of the proposed Fleet Operations Center and what we're proposing in the budget. DGS's Fleet Operations Center currently is located in Richmond off Lee Street. It was built in 1984. It consists of auto shops, office spaces, office trailers. We have 20,000-gallon, fuel station. We also have a car wash, storage facility, electrical charging station, and more, and 24/7 maintenance and repair call centers. This is where our state agencies bring their cars to be fixed. They take their cars from us. We provide about over 3,000 vehicles. We maintain those. We also, so essentially we have about 175 agencies, institutions that use our services in this particular site. The governor's introduced budget. Because of where the facility is located, we recognize that it will be pressure for us to relocate to support the boom and the renovation and the economic development that's going around the Diamond District, as well as the Scotts Addition. And so we are sitting in a place that has, over time, the value of that property has gone on. In fact, we have received a letter from the city, their interest in this property. And so we are being proactive, trying to find another location to move the fleet services. And so we came to you through the budget to see if we can seek authorization to relocate. And the way we're proposing to do it is to seek a treasury loan to acquire and then to improve a new facility that has the same programmatic ability and needs to serve our state employees. And then the budget language also authorizes us to sell it at a market value, fair market value, to use those proceeds to pay off the treasury loan, and then the remaining to transfer to the general fund.
Senator Deeds.
The note says you've got two potential sites. Are they two close sites?
They are, one of the sites we've identified is Midlothian Turnpike.
Okay.
The other one is off Route 1. We're at the early stages, but what we want to do is find a location that is easily accessible for transportation.
I agree with that. Route 1 in the south or Route 1 north? I mean, where?
Is it south or north? South.
South? Okay.
South.
Thank you.
So as a follow-up question to that is sort of, obviously, your cost of transportation analysis in terms of 3,200 units or vehicle equivalent units and the travel time for where the vehicles are actually used. What are the other operational costs and considerations for site locating?
The operational needs we identified were, we needed obviously a location that has the ability to give us call centers. We need 12 offices, vehicle fueling, and we wanted it to be between 15 miles to 20 miles from Capitol Square, easy access to the major roadway, bays. The operational cost would be essentially the same. We didn't want to expand, but we are interested in working with state police at some point in a time to be able to co-locate their fleet operation with our fleet operation, if that's an option. So we wanted to have the location for future growth if there are other state agencies that want to co-locate with us because of the kind of services we provide.
Well, that provides me with a quick follow-up, which is which other agencies have fleet operations or services?
Well, there are several, and I can certainly provide that to you. In fact, in some fleet, actually, our fleet even supports VCU at the moment, just because where it's located. We provide services to Capitol Police, and I can certainly provide a listing of all the other agencies that have their own fleet operation, just because where they're located. Our goal is to find a location so that we can then reach out to agencies and say, hey, we provide this service. We'd love to co-locate with you to address the savings of funding for them as well for us. So we're looking strategically, and so not doing things in silos. State Police was one that came to mind because we do support them in many ways. And I think they have close to over what, 300, 500 vehicles that they order for their troopers. So we would work with them on that.
Yeah, I would love to see the follow-up on what the other fleet opportunities are. I mean, if you have decentralized part unit, I mean, the cost efficiency is pretty significant, especially on your parts contract
We'll get that for you.
and leveraging that, so.
Sure.
thank you.
And then finally, the introduced budget also provided funding to renovate the Patrick Henry building. This building has not been renovated since 2005. One of the things, the study, and it's a great study for us to sort of figure out how well we're managing our capital state buildings. Patrick Henry, we usually renovate the third floor during the transition, but we wanted to go back and look at the entire building and do carpeting, fix the bathrooms, fix paint, provide new furniture, and also enhance security because that's where the governor's office is and the team. So the introduced budget provided that funding to renovate floor-to-floor Patrick Henry building for the next 6-7 months after the new transition occurs. So we're really excited about that. That hasn't happened in quite some time.
Saying is, I apologize, Mr. Chair. So the new governor is going to have to return to the third floor of the Capitol for a while.
Our goal, Mr. Chair, what we're working to do is the annex, the third floor of the annex, because the commissioner has moved out of that annex, so it's well-maintained. They've moved to the building next door. We've been working with them that will be the next transition site for the Nixon. And so what we'll do is we'll keep them there for a few months until we make complete transition and renovation.
Chair, I actually think government works better when the governor's office is in the Capitol. So I wish you'd think about just moving them back.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Thank you. I get it. That is my presentation, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to answer questions.
Mr. Chairman,
so much. Senator McDougal.
I just had one going back to the consolidated lab. Is the land that y'all are looking to locate that new facility, is that the land that VDOT currently owns now, or is that land that the lab owns?
No, Mr. Chair, the land that we're looking at is currently owned by VDOT. 50 acres of land was purchased by VDOT, and so we're asking about 21.1 of that land, of acres of that, to be able to co-locate with OCME and DFS.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Senator McDougal.
And if I'm not mistaken, the remaining 28 acres or so is prime development land on 301 and 295, and the state is not paying taxes for the ABC warehouse, the lab, VDOT, or the consolidated lab right now.
The land, the remaining of the land certainly is prime for economic development, yes.
Mr. Chairman, I hope we can have a conversation about the residual land that VDOT owns.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.
Any other follow-up from committee members?
Thank you for the opportunity.
Appreciate it. Next up, we have Commissioner Nelson Smith. Good morning.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for having me here this morning. We're going to talk about the capital budget need governor's introduced budget for Department of Behavioral Health. First, just a general overview. I'm sure you're familiar with it, but it's always good. Currently, we have about a $717 million capital infrastructure footprint. We run 12 facilities, including 8 behavioral health hospitals for adults, 1 behavioral health hospital for children and adolescents, 1 center for behavioral rehabilitation, 1 training center, and 1 medical long-term care facility. Each of these facilities operates day and night with over 2,000 beds, 4.2 million square feet, encompassing over 130 buildings and structures, 2,000 acres with over 5,500 employees, and just under 2,000 patients on any given day. These facilities are well taken care of, but as you can imagine, over the years, they've taken a huge beating, wear and tear. We currently are building, as you saw, the new Central State Hospital, but most of the other buildings are over 50 years old, and all the systems are outdated and obsolete. As a matter of fact, many of the parts for those systems we have to fabricate and/or we have to get creative because there are no supply parts for those. 7 of the 12 facilities, as a matter of fact, have exceeded their useful life and are in need of replacement or renovation. And when I refer to these buildings, they past useful life, they have not had significant any renovations. The next 2 slides show our current capital projects. These are broken down by funding source as much as possible. As you can see, almost all of these are addressing outdated or failing infrastructure needs. Again, these, we try to focus on life safety. As I mentioned, 24/7, 365, we are obligated to take care of these patients while they're in our care. All the ARPA funds that we asked for have been fully obligated for our highest priority and most emergent projects. We also have a number of projects that are being managed by my colleague at the Department of General Services, including the construction of Central State. But a lot of these projects that we have are on hold because supplemental funding is needed for increased construction costs. As you probably know, since we even started Central State, there have been massive cost increase. Of note, the system currently has 11, well, actually, it's probably more than that, right? It's 11, okay. Since this past year, I've declared 11 emergencies. Again, life safety. For example, an HVAC system goes out. The last thing we need is putting patients on a bus and driving them in some emergency situation, which we nearly faced in some of the other locations. That is added, these are emergency procurements allow us to bypass some of the DEB processes in order to make these things happen more quickly. But they've exceeded $56 million. This is just this year. This slide is a review of our capital funds from last session. Our team is already hard at work on these projects. The funds have been obligated and we're underway. $55.7 million was appropriated in 2025 to address the capital infrastructure improvements. The entire amount has been fully earmarked and will soon be obligated to address the projects that are underway. This includes $24.3 million for Eastern State Hospital, which includes an emergency supplement of $7 million, which is already obligated, for Building 1 security and safety improvements, and $17.3 million intended for Building 2 security and safety improvements. As you know, if you haven't been, Eastern State wasn't built to contain the population that we're working with today, which is almost completely forensic. And early in my tenure, there were people that were able to literally just pull a towel, the towel rack out of the wall, and there was nothing between them and getting out but drywall. And so we've had to install a DOC level fence to prevent some of these elopements, as we call them. Again, life safety stuff. As you know, William and Mary is like a baseball throws from the facility. Actually, a baseball throw to their baseball field. $20 million for life safety, which will be used to supplement emergency projects. Southwestern Virginia Mental Health Institute's HVAC replacement, which we've already begun. And then VCBR rooftop units and Piedmont Geriatrics boiler plant upgrade. And $11.4 million to address the heating and hot water requirements for Hiram Davis Medical Center and Central State Hospital Building 94.
Senator Deeds.
I don't see anything here to make the upgrades at down Chesapeake if you move the Hiram Davis patients.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Deeds, great question. By the time we made that the decision, it was already past the budget submissions. But more importantly is there's a code mandated process that we have to go through, which is very lengthy. And so we can't even say definitively that we're going to close it until the work group decides that, right? But in parallel to that, what we are doing is planning, because in my opinion, and I think everyone's opinion, and your colleagues, is that the urgency is that we know that there will be an imminent failure there,
Well,
and we're planning for that.
Mr. Chair, there are of course some people in this building that think that we need to move faster. Are you able to identify the potential costs for the renovation you would need in Chesapeake if the Hiram Davis patients are moved?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Deeds, absolutely. In our assessment, currently we have 38 patients there, many of which have already found placements in the community, and we're still working with those families to get it down to what again, they have a choice, and we want to make sure they have that choice. But in our assessment, what we believe is that we will be able to renovate 2 of those homes. As you know, if you haven't seen them, SEBTC it's a community. Like a dozen or more little homes with 5 bedrooms, and it really gives that home-like feel. And so what we're looking at is renovating 2 of those homes and upgrading them to a skilled nursing facility level of care, so oxygen bank walls, and so they can live in a home-like setting. We estimate that that's going to cost about $1.5 million per home, so we need 2, and then we have to upskill our employees in order to do so. To get that skilled nursing level of care. And then we go through licensing and, to get it up. But again, we are moving in tandem and parallel with this. The plans are moving while the work group is happening, because what we don't, as we all agree, is if there is something that will happen, because there are no backup systems there, we're planning as if we're going to do this even.
How much of that then is allotted to Hiram Davis? I mean, it says Central State and Hiram Davis. Is this all for Hiram Davis?
Mr. Chairman, the Building 94, so we are continuing to move, as if we still have to maintain operations, because what happens is we still have to operate Hiram Davis no matter what happens for at least the foreseeable future, for at least a year, right? Because as you know, the lengthy process for procurement and renovations, so we still have to make sure that those people there are going to have safe heat and water. Right now, we have HVAC units in every hallway with tubes, like the HVAC system is on its last leg, and it's not a very good sight. And so this is to just put the Band-Aids and strings and plug the dams until we get that place
And Mr. Chair, I mean, how much addition would you have to add to this if you were to replace the elevator? The elevator's not functional or not very.
It's done.
It's done.
Yes, yeah, Mr. Chair, it is done. We fixed it, both. They're
fixed it.
operational.
Okay, on the next, Mr. Chair, on the next page, it looks like you've got $15 million in the budget for renovation of CCCA, including metal detectors. And given the fact that CCCA is not staffed, but about for half its capacity, and discussions about what I guess the recommendations that came from JLARC 2 years ago now, that we needed to move, and language that's been included in the budget, we had to figure a way to come up with the best placement for youth. $15 million seems like an awful lot of money.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Senator Deeds, we're planning, because a lot of these processes take place. So I'm operating these facilities on a day-to-day basis, and we want to make sure that we have the best possible facility while we have these kids. And so for the foreseeable future, this is representing we need to make these fixes so the kids aren't busting out of the gym and getting out, in Stanton running to the highway, which has happened, or that, the milieu is more conducive to treatment and therapy. So we're going as if this is going to be a lengthy process.
Okay.
Right. So the governor's budget amendment adds for an additional $52.1 million in '26 to address the $182 million shortfall. And I'll discuss that shortfall in the next slide. Projects that'll be part of these funds include the HVAC replacement, and you see a lot of these are life safety. The HVAC replacement and duress at Catawba Hospital, renovations at the Commonwealth Center, security and access control at Piedmont Geriatric Hospital, security access control and window replacement at Southwestern. There are also 2 amendments to adjust project scopes, one for food service and the other for the temporary heat and hot water solutions at Hiram Davis. As we mentioned, you know, we have to operate safely. And last fall, as you know, we announced the closure of the old Hiram Davis facility. All the major systems are on their last life: plumbing, HVAC, electrical. We've had, in the past 8 years, raw sewage leaks inside the building. Legionella is currently in the pipes. We've mitigated that with the help of VDH. But it can only be resolved by replacing the plumbing. And if you replace the plumbing, you got to replace everything in the building. And that's just, so we have a plan. Over the summer, as you mentioned, the elevator failure, the HVAC system has failed, so we have portable units there now. We already talked about how complex the whole thing is. And the code that requires this whole process, it extends the closure time frame. So we plan to close in 2027 and work to keep life safety and these patients safe until then. Again, we are working in parallel with that because we know there's urgency. Finally, I want to give you a sense of the other needs. This is in general. As I mentioned before, we have an immediate capital budget need of $182 million, centered predominantly on life safety. Imminent failure of system improvements, as you recall, of the 11 emergencies I've declared this year. We're incurring significant risk. The capital projects that have been experiencing annual cost overruns that approach 25% increases per annum, which is 7% in '23 and 42% in '24. That's attributed to market escalation due to stress on supply chain and available labor, as you're aware. But we have no remaining appropriations for life safety or reserve to address emerging emergencies. But I want to make it clear that DBHDS has demonstrated the ability to manage multiple larger budgeted projects concurrently. Since I've taken over this agency, we've done major reorganizations to include the hospital division, and we have a really, really rock star team of Rob Johnson, our Director of Environment of Care, has done a tremendous job making sure that we're getting those funds obligated and out the door, and projects are coming in on time. They currently have 14 employees, which includes 7 project managers, 8 additional FTEs since '22 to '23. And here are some of the things that they've been able to accomplish. 9 ARPA projects that have totaled $50 million. All projects are obligated, under construction, and scheduled for completion between the fall of next year and '27. 10 capital projects totaling over $209.9 million. 57 maintenance reserve projects totaling $52.8. Impressive numbers for a small, mighty team. We've turned this place around in that area. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my remarks. Any questions?
Thank you, Commissioner. Follow-up questions from the committee? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, gentlemen. Thank you, folks.
So that concludes our docket items for today and presentation material. Tyler, do you want to walk us through next week? I know we'll have some bills to start to consider next week.
Yes, Senator McPike. Next week, we plan to do our overview on the capital outlay and transportation budgets. We will have a presentation from the VDOT Commissioner on the transportation forecast, and then we will also have a few transportation bills. Thank you, Subcommittee.
All right, the committee will rise.
The Senate of Virginia.